So here's the deal. Generally, when I do a podcast, I kind of think about a topic and then I think about who I want to talk to about it. So I was listening to some podcast. I'm not even sure what it was. And there was a quote from a guy named Dr. Zach Bush. And he said, Eagles don't spend 8 years in a nursing home before they die.
Yeah.
Um, so I started thinking about, just animals are not doing what humans do, and humans have become separate from nature. And I was like, well, who is somebody who has a lot of nature in their life? And that's where you came up. So I was like, all right, I'll have a conversation with Sara about nature.
Great. I'm in.
So when did you first like start spending time in nature?
Oh, we're rolling right
We're
now.
rolling. We're rolling.
Oh,
We'll
so
edit out all that first part and then it's
yeah.
totally unedited.
Okay, great. I'd say I don't think I really found nature until I was in college. I went to Penn State, which is like really the armpit of Pennsylvania. It's freezing. It is not a likely place to spend time in nature, but we did. Like there's mountains there, and I just found myself. I was playing college lacrosse at the time, but I remember being like, I need to go for a hike. I need to go for a run on that golf course. I started mountain biking a little bit. That was like my gateway drug.
So when you were a kid, you were not like playing in streams or hiking or skiing or doing boating, anything like that?
Well, that's a good, I guess my parents had a boat, so we used to
Uh-huh.
go down to their boat, do the boat, on the weekends, and they would like hold us hostage, literally put like three kids in a boat, leave us there and go out to dinner. Or I remember being very little and I would fight with my sister and she would put us in the dinghy. My parents would put us in the dinghy of the boat because we were fighting and we weren't strong enough to pull ourselves back up to the boat. And that would be like our punishment for fighting. And they would throw a book and maybe you could have a book back there.
Well, that's funny. Because so for a little back and forth, because I like to talk.
Yeah.
So I was when I came up with that question, I was thinking, okay, well, I was definitely drawn to nature when I was younger, but I don't think I realized it. So I liked playing in streams. We used to go hike in the woods with my two cousins all the time. We would build forts in the woods. We would go beer can collecting, trying to find like uh, antique beer cans, but it was really just about being in the woods. Um, but I really wasn't aware of it. Like I was not like if I was swimming, I wasn't like, oh, there's a nice sunset or
No.
anything like
I
that.
don't think it's for kids. It's not till you're
No.
older. But were you in Sherwood?
I was, yeah. But
I mean,
even
of
up in
course.
Baltimore, like the elementary school by our house, I remember just like going down to the stream and just walking up the stream and being like, where does this go to? Um, and I loved doing that. I loved being in the snow, especially like at night, like when the moon was out and was shining on the snow. But it's only memories. I was not like, oh, it's snowing. I want to be outside at night. It just like it's like more like a memory. But it's interesting because when I went to college, I was in Lexington, Virginia, which is probably similar terrain to Penn State, kind of.
Yeah.
Um, and
Rural.
although there's incredible nature all around, I was not doing nature at all. I had a mountain bike, was riding back and forth to class, but was never doing mountain bike trails. So it's interesting that you got into it in college.
Well, but I think when you were talking about Sherwood as a young kid, that's access.
Yeah,
If you don't have access to it, it's a lot harder.
yeah.
And the push now, I'm sure you've heard about this book called The Anxious Generation. And there's three key pieces to this book, which is everyone should read it, by the way. But one of the big ones is that kids need to have risky, unstructured play where you are allowed to like climb trees without someone like being like, hey, don't go up that high. And where you have like not materials, but materials. Like you take a log and you turn it into you know, a bridge or whatever. And Sherwood has an abundance of that key piece for growing up. It sounds like you're like the poster child for it, but I grew up in a community that was like cookie cutter houses and maybe there was a stream, but people weren't doing that.
Yeah. It's interesting with the let kids take risk. There's like a quote of do not stop skateboarders who are skating on like the museum steps or something. And it's basically like if you're taking a risk, but you're being careful doing it, let kids do that.
Yeah.
Um, and I had the perfect example of that. I was walking on Beach Road in Sherwood, and there's a pavilion on the main pier for people who haven't heard of it. And there's kids, probably 10, 12, and they're jumping off the pavilion, which I did a ton as a kid. Certainly, you could break an arm. Hopefully, you don't break a neck. But at the time, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I was also president of the community at the time. So I knew that some people might expect me to go stop them.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And my wife and I are walking, and there's people coming at me, and I'm like, Anne, just start talking to me so it looks like I don't see these people, because it was the double whammy. I did not want to be the one who was like the orthopedic surgeon and the president of the community who was not letting kids do something that they were being careful. They weren't doing flips or anything like that. They were just diving off. So I
That's
get
an
to let kids.
awesome example of like a
Yes.
conflict of values. Like your personal value is get out there, get dirty, get in nature and play. But then you have all these other parts of your life that are like, it's expected that I tell these kids not to do this.
Yeah. The when you were getting into nature in college, did it have anything to do with trying to be in shape for lacrosse, or was it totally just you
Oh, it
wanted
was
to get
like
out there?
probably more the escape of it.
Uh-huh.
I need to like I now know at 50 that I am like an extroverted introvert. And so I need to have a lot of time. And now I know how much time I need to have, by myself, basically forest bathing. Like I just need to be in untouched nature of some kind, like a lot.
So were you aware of it back then, or it happened and now you appreciate it looking back?
I wasn't aware that how much I needed it, but looking back, I know that it started to become like twice a week. I had to go do that. Or even in the younger parts of my life when we were going through some really challenging times, I had to run.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just get outside and run, and a treadmill wasn't going to do it. And I've never been somebody to kind of to do a gym situation. I'm more of a get outside girl, as
So
you
it's
know, because you chose me for this chat.
yeah. So it's funny because I think it was in the walking challenge I said, or maybe it was the sprinting challenge, but I was like, a walk on the treadmill is good, a walk outside is better, and a walk in nature is best, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, But our trail in college was literally right outside my house. And so on the right side of the trail was a river that was very scenic. And beyond that river was like fields. And on the left side of the trail was like not mountains, but like a rock ledge of a mountain. So it was I mean, the scenery was incredible. But my one run I remember was the college lacrosse team. We had either lost or done something wrong. And the day before, the coach killed us with sprints, and he was probably like late 30s. And the next day he was like, let's go for a nice lactic acid burning run. And it was a slow pace, but he didn't tell us how long we were going. And I think back on it all the time is that trail was beautiful, and it was the worst experience of my life because all I was thinking was how much longer, how much longer. And we probably only went 5 or 6 miles. And like now I would go for a 6 mile run just for fun. But in an 18-year-old's mind, I was not thinking to myself, look how beautiful this trail is, or
No,
look at
because you
that
had
cow in the
uncertainty.
pasture.
You didn't know how long you were going, and
No.
you knew it was a punishment. This could have been hell.
Yeah, I always say it was my Vietnam.
Well, aren't you lucky?
Yes. So if that's your worst problem, I guess I'm doing okay. So then when you like were a young adult, did you have any like adventures, like travel adventures, or as you got into things like skiing, boating,
Yes.
things like that?
So when I graduated Penn State, I went out to Telluride, Colorado, and I lived there for 3 years. And I was like a kid in a candy shop, and I was adventure seeking, and I had zero knowledge, and I had zero fear. So I did some really crazy stuff that I would like if my daughter did it now, I'd be like, you've got to be kidding me. I would go backpacking and I would just bring my food with me. And I didn't even have enough information to know like you need like a cook stove and you need to filter your water. I'd bring like a water bottle and I'd fill it up if I found a stream. And then I would spend like a lot of time without any water. I would eat in my tent because I would like hike all day. And then I didn't know that you needed like bear safe canisters. I would come off of the mountain after like 2 or 3 days by myself, and people would be like, "Were you up at like by Bridal Falls?" And I was like, "Yeah." There were like 2 bear sightings last night. I could have been eaten like so many times.
So this is the I think this is the reason why your name popped in my head first was I guess last year you went on like a solo trip in Idaho for a couple days and you were talking about hiking by yourself and I was the first thing that came to my mind was first of all was a lot of women are afraid to hike by themselves because of some lunatic person who might jump out of the woods, but in reality you're so far out there that's not where the lunatics are. And the second
I'm
thing
more
is,
scared in New York City than I am.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. But the other thing is bears. And I'm like, does Sarah have bear spray? So it got me down that whole role of like, what is the role of risk versus what's the role of like living your life? So were you aware of any risk when you were younger? And are you
no.
aware of risk now?
I was to a fault. I was not aware of risk as a young
Uh-huh.
person. And I really found peace and joy and love and adventure out there. That's when I really truly fell in love with nature. And then now I have this need, like people need to brush their teeth, kind of like that. And I'm aware more of the risks. Like when I was in Idaho on this past week, I bought bear spray and I hiked with it almost on every hike. There was hikes I did that I should have had it that I didn't. But yeah, I'll take bear spray, but I'm not scared about other people or even a bear. I've even seen bears on hikes. I've seen bears when I've been camping with Alex in Alaska. And this is a kind of a funny story where Alex was like, I didn't, as I said, I don't have any knowledge. I don't know. Alex did all these like Knowles outward bound courses, prepare you for all the things that can happen. And I'm just kind of along for the ride. And I don't know enough to kind of guide what we're doing. So I was like, give me a job. I want a job. He's like, go fill these water bladders up with water. So I walk over and I fill them up. And there I am, like digging them in the water. And I look up, there's 2 bears right in front of me. Like right
Wow.
there, Kai.
Yeah.
Like right there. And I don't know what to do. So I call back to him and I'm like, there's bears here. He's like, then you should turn around. That was his answer.
Yeah. So when you so you did all this stuff by yourself and then Alex is kind of like more I guess you're implying because he did all the leadership stuff he's more of an expert
Yeah.
were then you like oh my gosh I can't believe I was doing that stuff that I wasn't supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so my bear stories are I never really thought much about bears until after college friends and I drove cross country for 9 weeks and we did a ton of hiking but we were in Glacier and I guess the first episode was some like more of a state park where you know all the people are camping around each other and there's dumpsters and stuff. And the bears were in the dumpsters making a ton of noise.
Okay.
And I was in the tent with Phil McIntyre up all night long. Just it was the worst experience ever hearing the
Scared.
bears. And they were clearly like probably the most what would you call it like tame bears ever. Like
Yeah.
they were just. But then we were hiking in Glacier a couple weeks later, and we were up by the Canadian border, and we caught fish, and we cooked the fish, but we uh, gutted the fish like way away, like 200 yards away. But then you could hear those bears all night
Yep.
long. Everybody else slept through it, but me. And it was terrifying. But like I do remember as we were on the hike, just making sure we were singing or making sure we were hitting pots and pans so we were aware of it. But we didn't even know what bear spray was back then.
I know. It
And
was a
now when we
different
go
world.
with
But in both of your situations, in my opinion, you're safe because there just needs to be something better than you around. Like if I'm hiking and I see like a big old overweight man, I'm like, no problem. You are way more tasty than me. So that trash dumpster and those fish guts were way easier pickings than you.
yeah, there is a story where we hiked a lot with the kids and in the Jackson Hole area because that's where Ann's brother lives, and they were because they kind of grew up doing it. Like I feel like if I was that age and I was taken there, I would have complained and like my legs are hurting. How much longer? But I think they grew up at so young doing it that it was normal for them. But there was a time where my father-in-law were hiking and we saw a bear and we were just watching the bear. It was far enough off, but as soon as it came to us, I kind of did what you're not supposed to do. I dropped down a ledge out of sight and then ran because I was like, I'm faster than my father-in-law. So we might need to run that by an expert to find out if that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get big and you're supposed to like be a presence, but
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
And what is it? Is it grizzly bears are supposed to get big and black bears are supposed to roll in a ball, or is it the opposite?
I feel like it's the opposite, but I'm
Because
not sure.
if your phone doesn't work, you can't Google it
I
when
get
you
totally.
when
Hold
you
on, let
need
me
to.
let me take a picture of you to find out if you're a black or a grizzly.
Yeah, yeah,
Usually, when depending on where you are, you know. Like if you're in Alaska, it's that means it's the worst bear. That's I think
yeah,
the black bear.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you start skiing?
I grew up skiing like one weekend a year in the Poconos, and then
Uh,
when I lived in Telluride, I was like bonkers all in.
uh,
I learned to snowboard and then I started teaching kids how to ski while I was there. I was a school teacher too, but I did that for 3 years. And then when I came home, Alex was a telemarker and I was a snowboarder. And then he started taking me on trips with him. And I couldn't keep up on the snowboard to telemark skiing. So then I switched to a telemarker. And then at the beginning years of our marriage, I mean, if we had a free minute, we were skiing together.
uh,
And we've been skiing ever since. And all three girls, thank gosh, love it. You know, people have kids and they're like, I just want them to be, I don't know, kind or, all these nice things that people think about for their children. We had kids when we got pregnant with Isla that we were like, oh no, what if we have one that doesn't like skiing? What will we do?
yeah.
Thank goodness everybody likes it.
It's funny with skiing because my early years of skiing were probably like yours, like more like the round top Seven Springs type of thing.
Yep, yep.
And looking back at it, I was like, okay, did I appreciate being in nature? I'm like, no, that's more like an amusement park ride. There's people around you. And the funny thing about skiing is the more skilled you become, the more isolated you are. So like if you're out west at Telluride, at Jackson Hole, Vail, wherever you are, Vail would be a perfect example. If you're on the greens and the blues, you feel like you're at Seven Springs. There's all these people around you. The farther out, the higher the elevation, the scenery's better, and you're by yourself usually. Like you're often, just you and one other person, whoever you're skiing with, are the only people on that slope. Versus if you're on the standard main causeway blue slope, there's 20 people around you. So it's a unique sport that way where your experience with nature and how peaceful it is and kind of like how in the flow you are greatly increases the better you are. And you don't have to be like an Olympian, you don't have to be a competitive skier, but you do have to be good enough to go down those things where they're going to be more isolated.
And confident. I think confidence is a huge piece to
Yeah.
skiing.
Yeah.
Because when you're nervous and timid, it keeps you about all the people and all the buildings, which is not where I find the most peace and
Yeah.
joy.
It's funny now because like now I guess I'm gonna go skiing in the last week of February or first week in March, I forget. And so it's also with fitness, it's like that one thing that like keeps you motivated. Like, why am I doing squats at 55 years old type of thing?
Yeah.
Um, and I was thinking about it because on our ski trip, we tend to, and I'm the one who we have a group that kind of gets to the bar at 2:30. We always get first tracks. We're always at the lift whenever it opens. But myself and Dr. Klepper, who you call Brian, but just in case anybody listens to this, um, we go till the very, very last lift. And I was like, it's not like because it's a competition. It's because when the lift first opens is when you're going down and nobody's there. But it's also those last couple runs at the end of the day, totally peaceful. Nobody else is on the mountain. Sometimes the sun's starting to drop down, and that's where you're the most isolated. And that is the most peaceful part to me of the whole sport. So I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, I don't think I'm skiing just for the sake of being around 100 other people for the competition of it. It's almost like it's become more like hiking for me.
Yes. Yes. I used to think that what I wanted in like when like what's my highest value. And I would have said at some point, different times in my life, different things. But the thing about nature that's my highest value is that it's untouched. So it's not just being in the woods. I want to be in the woods where I don't see human nature. I don't want to see a building or a structure or a billboard or anything. And so that's where I find the most peace. And not all ski places are like that. Grand Targhee is, and that's why we love it.
Yeah.
And the Sherwood Woods, untouched. You'll see a person in there, but you pass them. It's not like you're walking with people or you're never walking behind somebody, really, ever.
And that's why people backcountry ski or helicopter ski
Yep.
or, it's it's interesting because it's the same thing with hiking. Like we have trails in our neighborhood. I love the trails. I take the dogs out there all the time. But there is that element of when you want to be in nature and you're like, all right, I'm going to listen to the sounds of the woods. And you still hear cars, you still hear the planes going over top. Same thing when you walk on like Beach Road and you're like, oh, is that a star? No, it's a plane, And it's because we live close to the airport, but so every time I do that, I love doing it. I'm not complaining. These are the worst first world problems ever, but it is not the same as being in an isolated place. And I definitely like when I'm hiking, I feel it. I'm like, this is kind of like um just not the same experience as when you were out west. And I think it's the same I would say the same thing. It's not that I'm saying I got to move out west. I'm just saying when it comes to like getting out isolated, you want to be in isolated places. So like Anne, I love like mountains and bodies of water. Anne loves open spaces. So when she goes to the Eastern Shore, she loves it because there's open spaces,
Mm.
but it's not the same as being in Texas where you look and you can't see anything but horizon. Like there's nothing there on that space. And I always wonder, is that just more natural
Yeah,
or did
nature
we,
nurture here.
yeah, yeah. Is it nurture or nature? How'd you get used to it?
That's really funny. One thing that as this conversation's been going around, and you were like, "Are you scared when you're hiking by yourself?" And then I'm saying I want it untouched. I think the win for me of being in the untouched is way greater than any fear that I would have of something bad happening.
Yeah. It's like be smart. Now you're old enough that you take bear
Yeah.
spray, but you're still willing to go do it.
Yeah, I think I'm just more worried about. I mean, I try not to be worried about things, but if I'm worried about something, it's definitely not something that's going to happen in the woods. It's like, you know, other things.
So, and this is where I just wonder if it's developed or if you're born with it. Is like Jimmy Buffett has a song "Cowboy in the Jungle," and it says in it, "I don't want to swim in a roped off sea." And I guess like growing up on the water, I loved being on the water, whether it was on a boat, whether it was in a canoe. Now that would be a kayak, but back then it was canoes. Whether it was water skiing, hydrosliding, jet skiing, just playing ball tag, down at the piers. I would be down there all day long. All my friends were down there all day long. And I guess it was about 30 years ago when they wanted to build a pool. And somebody who is that generation older than me was like, you gotta convince your parents to give a lot of money for the pool. And I looked at him and I just thought it was the craziest thing ever. I was like, why would we want a pool? Like everybody else has pools. We have the river. Like, why would you want a pool? Now, I totally get it. I took my kids to the pool. I go to the pool. It's nice having a pool. But I feel like just something naturally with me was like, I don't want to swim in a roped off sea. Like, you can't, it's not like I swim from here to the ocean or I boat from here to the ocean, but somehow I like to know that it continues.
Yeah,
Like
you
it's
could.
actually a weird comfort for me. Does that make any sense to you?
I think I'm wondering if this is like your ripcord. You're like, in an emergency, could I get in a boat and get out
Yes.
to the major ocean?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's part of like the connectedness of all, like that this body of water that we see is connected to the ocean, which is connected to all the other oceans, and it helps, I don't know, part of the oneness, which we've
Yeah.
talked about.
And there's like, yeah, I mean, there's lakes as big as the Severn River. but I
Yep.
know they're a lake, so it's
Yeah.
not as relaxing.
That's crazy. That's funny.
So with we're gonna take it back to
Yeah.
the orthopedic realm a little bit. So um, with people who the reason I started thinking about the topic was people who are drawn to nature tend to be healthier. Like it's pretty hard to actually enjoy nature unless you have a certain level of physical fitness. Um, do you feel like nature has any role in you staying in shape or in the past or now?
100%. And just like you were saying, how every year you find yourself like ramping up for ski season, right?
Mhm.
So I definitely do that. I have to train my body to be able to ski. And if I have an injury, my first thing, I got to get back into the woods. What do I need to do? What physical therapy do I need to do? How do I need to get stronger? What do I need to do to get back into the woods? And it also, and maybe other people feel this way, but at this age, at 51, I have this cost benefit analysis that I'm constantly playing. Like if someone's like, hey, Sarah, like Alex got into e-foiling, super into e-foiling. Hey, Sarah, you want e-foil? I'm like, I'll try it, but I'm not willing to do anything that could jeopardize my chances of getting in the woods or skiing. So I'm thinking about all of that so that I can be fit enough and physically strong enough to do the nature things.
And so the risk of e-foiling is too great, but
Yeah.
the risk of you wrestling a bear is not too great.
You got it.
Yes.
What's a great story, Brian? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
Ty, what's a
Yes.
great story?
Yes. Yeah. That's true. So, uh, so when you're getting out there, like, what's the role of, everybody has stressful lives. If you have kids and all the stuff you're doing in life, what's your role of stress reduction, like using it as a stress reduction technique?
I don't think I knew the huge impact it had on me until more recently. Um, when I think about all of the adversity that I've faced in my life, the thing that got me through it every time was nature.
Mhm.
It was going for a run, looking out over the water. Like when we used to live downtown, I used to run the Naval Academy when Alex was sick and when Phoebe was sick. Then then summer boat ride, if you could get on a boat ride, that felt good. Then for my own adversity, in the woods the entire time. I don't know that I had many days where I did not get into the woods in that 9 months. And I feel like there is a special energy that happens in there. I've seen this. Have you seen like the word forest and then they break it up to forest? I just kind of
Oh no,
love
that's awesome. Yeah.
thinking about it that way. When I am there, there is a peace and an ease. It's like um it's an energetic change that can happen. It's like if you go in with a full head of stress and things that you're worried about, it's only a matter of steps before you kind of, I think of it as like I pick up the energy of the forest. So it's peaceful, it's easy, it's resilient, it has stood the test of time, it can handle all kinds of storms and weather, and it just stays. And I think the time I spend in there is just a reminder, like it's impermanent. You're going to get through it. You've been through it. You are nature. We're all nature. We're no different than those trees. And I need the daily reminder of that so that I get out of my head and into my body and remember what's important. That's what it does.
So with like a mindfulness practice, was there an element where you were getting into the woods just to blow off steam? So you're like, maybe you're like, I'm getting off into the woods or I'm going for a run, but I'm blowing off steam and I'm still ruminating about this other thing? Or was there a time where you got out and you were able to just focus on the run or just focus on the trees or the sounds of the birds or things like that? Was there ever like a jump, or is that even something you work on?
No, that's a great question. So when I was younger, I didn't know. I would go in and ruminate, and I probably came out of the forest no better or slightly better. And then as I became older, I became much more aware of my thoughts and kind of taking control over them a little bit, catching myself in fear thoughts versus other thoughts. And so in like a really on an average day, your what's for dinner and who said what and blah blah blah. You go in and the forest will just do its magic, in my opinion. Maybe you're ruminating for the first 5 minutes, and then next thing you know, you're more peaceful and calm. But when you've got big stuff going on, I think it takes some intention. Like maybe you allow yourself a certain amount of time, like, hey, I'm going to think about this until I get to this point in the run. And then I'm going to start focusing on my senses or do a mantra or focus on my breath, like all the different things that we can do in mindfulness to help us. Because that ruminating, it's not helpful. Like they say, your negative thoughts are only helpful for 1 second. That's the amount of time for you to take your hand off a hot stove. So ruminating over the thought is it's gonna take you down.
It's so interesting because like with running, when I was younger, and I would run and I was purely running just to be in shape for sports, I would actually look at runners and be like, what are they doing? Like almost like it was vanity. Like, why are you running if you're not playing a sport? But then it was always so difficult because it was always how much longer? Am I going fast enough? It was never enjoyable. And then when I started running afterwards, in my 20s and my 30s, I was still doing it because I thought that's what you had to do to be healthy. But if I was mad at something, I ran great. If I started daydreaming about something that I was excited about, I ran great. But I still fell into those days where I was like, how much longer? How much longer? And those days were horrible. And then every once in a while, you wouldn't think about I wouldn't think about anything except for maybe my breathing and my heartbeat and the sweat pouring off me. And those were the best days ever. And as I started switching to trail running, I had more of those days because you had to concentrate on where you were putting your foot. You couldn't just pound it. So it took your mind off of how much farther. And it wasn't until later that I realized how many of my walks, if I was stressed about something and I went for a walk, it did help. It was blowing off steam, but I was still in my head ruminating about what I was stressed about. And I think that's why I like skiing so much. You can't go down a ski mountain thinking about overhead and how you're going to control your overhead at work,
Yeah.
or you just can't. You
Well,
have to
they're both of
concentrate on
these
the
things,
next
the
turn.
skiing and the running in the woods, are requiring you to be present,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
With
That's the
walking
goal.
though, with walking it's easy to get in your head and not be present. So I almost feel like it's great practice to be present. It sounds crazy, but be like, look at the tree, concentrate on the tree, stop concentrating about whatever problem you're having.
Oh, yeah, for sure. If I'm in the woods, these woods aren't as good. Definitely out west, it's better. But there's places along on Beach Road. I'll just pick up a leaf of something and I'll break it up and I'll crunch it up in my hands, especially if it's pine, and I'll smell it while I'm walking because it's going to make you be present. It's going to stop you from ruminating.
Yeah.
Just using all the things, whether it's where you put your foot or what you can smell or touch the bark. Like you said, like get out of your head.
So as you led me into this. So as you became a tree hugger,
Oh,
what did you think about tree huggers when you were a teenager versus now? Because I definitely have some thoughts on this.
okay. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I didn't really even know any tree huggers. I was like, you people wearing your Birkenstocks, ripped jeans, or like I remember judging them. That's all I knew. Like I didn't want to be them. I thought they were freaks. And I have definitely hugged trees in Sherwood Forest and just been like, if I see somebody, what am I gonna say? If somebody walks by, how am I gonna explain that I'm actually hugging this tree?
I think it's funny because so when I first got on the board, Sherwood has a ton of trees. I thought we had plenty of trees, but we had some projects where we might have to take some trees down. And I never realized how much of a big deal it was for some people to take one tree down or take 5 trees down when I thought the project was a valuable project. And I just didn't get it. I'm like, we have so many trees, we'll just plant another tree. There's so many trees. But then you start reading about some of these books that are super cool about like how trees communicate and trees are living
Oh yeah.
and noticing noticing all the stuff growing out of a dead tree, or noticing the fallen tree regrowing and stuff, and you start getting it. You're like, I can understand that. I think of it more like a hunter thinks of it now, where there are some trees that have to be taken down for some projects, but you try to do it as minimal as possible. You try to plant more trees. I'm much more balanced than when I didn't understand it. And we had people tying themselves to trees when the construction crew came.
In
That
Sherwood?
happened. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It happens. It happens everywhere.
That's
But now
hilarious.
I think I'm like kind of like a little bit of a tree hugger. I'm not quite tying myself to the trees, but I'm definitely like, I should probably touch this bark, see what it feels like, that kind of thing.
I feel like they're my oldest friends.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
got wisdom, and when you're in there, they have served me. Like I have nothing else to say other than when I go in the woods, I feel better. And when I am out, I feel less good and I need to touch it regularly to get back into it. There's this, I don't know what the original quote by Nietzsche is, but it's something like never trust a thought that happens indoors. And that is the truth for me. I could
Oh,
get
that's great.
overwhelmed and worried and caught up in something and then go outside and all of a sudden it's like, what was that? Oh, and why don't you try this great idea?
So when you are working on like because you're writing a book, right?
Yeah, it's done.
And you've had blogs and been on podcasts before and done social media posts and things like that. Do you do a lot of that work at home, or do you think about it when you're out walking or working out or exercising? Like what's the role of nature in your creative process?
Is huge. First of all, if you look on my Instagram, I almost never post when I'm not in the Sherwood Woods. I
Uh,
always post in there. And what I've tried to do now is get the post over with in the beginning of my walk so I can enjoy my walk. Because sometimes I'll just keep thinking about it. Next thing you know, I'm like, I just did that whole walk for one post. I don't want to do that anymore. But I do think that the more clear thoughts come to me there. And then for my book writing process, that was interesting. There was like maybe 3 or 4 renditions of that entire book. And it's only in this last rendition, which is the one that's being published, is there was a go for a walk pretty much every day. Go for a walk, come home, get your cup of tea, do some breathing for a couple of minutes, and then write. And when I would get stuck, I would then just go back outside, take my shoes off, breathe a little bit, come back in and write. So I used it to reset my clarity. To get the idea is that we get out of our head because although those thoughts that get us stuck are not the ones we're looking for. We're looking for the more inspired, creative, flowing thoughts, which I can tap into more when I'm in nature.
do you ever stop when you're on a hike and like put notes in your phone, or do you do your hike, get home? Like does it just stay with you? Like what do you do with that?
These are all good questions.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes I hike with my phone. I prefer not to, and just kind
Mhm.
of keep it in the car or, in the golf cart and just think if it's important enough, I'll remember it when I get back.
Okay. So it's interesting because I feel like sometimes I have good ideas. Like literally I have a whole speech when I'm on my hike.
Yeah,
And then if I've tried to write it down now, because if I don't, I'll do the same speech the next time I'm hiking. Like that
I
same
know.
speech will
And
keep going.
that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to put any more time into this.
Yeah. And it's one of the things about doing a podcast is like at work, I'll have these topics, and the people I work with, I'll be like doing my rant about certain topics. Once I actually discuss them in more of something that I put out there, then I'm like, they get a break from the topic. So like after today, they're not going to have to hear me lecture about nature for probably about 6 months. They'll be safe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So one of my things I'm interested in is trying to get people just to eat healthier. And uh, I feel like that has a lot of role in chronic inflammation, which is actually the vast majority of orthopedics. Like you think it's the snowboarder who breaks the wrist or the athlete who tears their ACL or something like that. But really about 80 to 90% of what we do is more chronic problems that are wear and tear things. And all of our bodies get wear and tear. But the people who are flexible and strong, which you have to be flexible and strong to get in nature, tend to do better. And people who eat more of an anti-inflammatory diet tend to eat better. Do you think there's any correlation? Like the person who's out for a hike or skiing, you kind of think of them like eating an apple, a banana, and trail mix. You're not really thinking of them eating French fries and a can of ravioli on the slope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, do you think getting in nature takes you to eating more naturally?
I love your analogy about the skier and the ravioli because it's so true. Although they
Yeah.
often serve French fries, let's be honest, and a
Yes.
burger.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're packing on a hike, you're going on a big hike and you're packing snacks, you're packing clean food.
Yeah.
It's just like the culture of who it's like the who you're with and what you're doing and how you feel when you're there. So I think so. What do you think?
It's like the chicken and the egg. I feel like if you're out there hiking, and it doesn't have to be hiking, skiing, it can be kayaking, running, whatever it is, whatever comes first, you're gonna start eating healthy. Like you're just gonna start eating more natural foods. So like Anne rides horses, so she's in areas where she's around farmers markets all the time. She's around people who are selling grass-fed beef, that kind of thing. Uh, and it's really good food. And it's not that the sugary processed food isn't tasty, and addictive and all those kind of things, but you realize that this other food tastes just as good. And I just feel like the healthier you get, whether it's working out, being in nature, or whatever, you're going to be more drawn to the healthier food.
For sure. If you go for a long walk or a long hike, not long, sorry. I don't want it to be long because after a long hike, you might sit down to a huge burger. That's fine. Not what I'm saying. But if let's say you go spend 30 minutes in nature, you're more likely to eat something clean
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
done because you feel good, you have more clarity, you're more likely to access um that part of your brain that's going to make the decision that's the healthiest for you, not a reactive decision, maybe more of a intentional decision because you just spent that time.
Yeah. And it's not to say, I mean, a lot of times you're in nature on a daily basis, but you're also going on trips that are designed around getting in nature. And
Yeah.
that's a little different. So if you see me having a double bacon cheeseburger and a Coca-Cola, which I usually wouldn't eat like at lunch at work, if I've skied all day, yes, I
Night.
will be eating that.
Yeah.
That's my next step in health, is to maybe order the salmon and the broccoli instead of the double cheeseburger, but I'm not quite there yet.
No, I think you need it all.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, that's when you
So
have the burger.
what do you think about the concept of just kind of returning to the elements? So I always joke with my kids, there's no bad weather, there's just poor clothing choices. Um, and there's a tendency for people to be like, oh, it's too hot and humid, I'm staying inside. I've never been one of those people. Like, I actually like to get outside and sweat, but I do get it that you have to shower again if you're going out, or, if you're dressed up, you don't really want to be sweating. But I don't mind the heat in the summer. And I feel like technology has made it so the cold in the winter isn't nearly as bad. Like, there's so much stuff now that you can get out there in the cold, cold, cold and still enjoy it.
As long as you have your heated vest and your heated blah 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 and your heated
Yeah.
blah blah blah, and you come home and then you come back to your car that's heated. Sure.
Yeah.
I do
But
think there's a transition. I've always said this, how like I think it's most clear in the spring. You're inside more. You spend a whole day outside and it's so hot and it kind of hits us hard in Maryland that it makes you feel a little sick. There's like a day or two where you're like, am I getting sick? And you're not getting sick. It's like this adjustment where your body is like recalibrating to heat and humidity. And then you have to stay in it in order to get used to it. But like, for example, Alex, my husband, works all day long in a office and he commutes an hour each way with air conditioning that's like high blast on him. So when he comes in our house that I keep really warm in the summer, he's dying because he just hasn't gotten used to it. He
Oh,
needs it
wow.
super cold because he didn't do the transition. It's like ease your way in to keep being able to handle the heat or the cold.
So there's huge benefits for health to being out in the elements. Like it's super beneficial to run in the cold or the run in the heat and hike and do all those things. And now you're getting more people who are trying to artificially kind of recreate that stuff with like cold plunges or saunas or things like that. And it's funny because I cold plunge, um, but before I had a cold plunge, people were like, why don't you just cold shower? I could not do it. The water dripping on me was too much. But I was like, if I had a frozen lake, I could easily dive into the frozen lake. That would be no problem at all. Uh, and then the cold plunge was the nice kind of in between. Um, I don't do it every day, but I kind of do it in cycles. Um, but same thing with saunas. You hear all these people getting saunas um, because I think we're so used to the air condition, the heat. We've kind of become wimps in a
Yeah,
way.
it's not what you're saying. What I hear you saying is that we're seeking this extreme.
Hmm.
And because we're not having it in our regular life, 9 to 5, driving, commuting, whatever, we are seeking it otherwise.
Yeah. So it's not too cold to walk your dog. If you just get the proper clothes, you can get out and walk your dog. It's not too hot to go outside and it's great for your health.
And I would say just go for 5 minutes. Like just go for a little bit. I'm not going to go, just tell yourself you're not going to go for long. You probably go longer than you said you were. Just go start it. Do a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. So with Alex, he has some of the same hobbies as you in nature, but he has different hobbies than you. So like what are his hobbies that he does that you don't touch?
Okay. This is going to be hilarious. He loves hunting. I love
Uh,
fishing. I'll fish all day long, but I'm
uh,
not that into hunting. But maybe he's gonna watch this. I don't know. But here's the thing. This man has like all the gear and he goes hunting this time of year, as often as he possibly can. He would say more than he should and not as much as he wants to. But this is what we know. He has not gotten a deer recently. And the girls and I laugh about this. We think this is his version of meditation, that he's just not willing to be like, yep, I'm going to go meditate for 2 hours. He sits in a deer stand. He can't move. He can't be on a device. He literally has to be completely still with no scent on him, holding his weapon of choice, which is a bow and arrow, for 2 hours. And he
yeah.
does it as he can't get enough of it. He would do it all day long if he could.
So this is perfect because so I grew up hunting with my dad and then went 35 years without hunting. And so when I was younger, I didn't think of it that way at all. I think the people who, and I have relatives who are psycho fly fishermen, friends who absolutely love hunting. I think it's the mindfulness, it's being in the
Uh,
zone.
yeah.
Uh, I went pheasant hunting and I was with my cousin Eric and they gave me the instructions. You know, you walk in a line and they're like, don't don't shoot Eric, don't shoot Brian, don't shoot the dog because if you're drop below the horizon and the dog jumps up, you can shoot the dog. And I get in the car and we're driving to the place we're gonna hunt. And Eric's like, "You look pretty nervous." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not supposed to shoot you. I'm not supposed to shoot Brian. I'm not supposed to shoot the dog, but I don't really want to be embarrassed and miss the pheasant. It's a ton to think about." And when I got out there, I was amazed because you had to be so locked in. There was no other thoughts that came to your mind. It was like knowing where the two people were and bird. There's a bird. There's a
Yeah.
bird. Is that a bird? There's a bird. Don't shoot below the horizon. And it was like the most relaxing thing ever because there was no other thoughts besides what was right in front of me. It was like totally like being in the zone.
We've talked about this before. I think golfers, tennis players, hunters, fly fishing people, all of these people are really in love with flow. And people that do it all the time, you couldn't keep doing it if you weren't in flow. If you were out there with a golf club and thinking about all the stuff you needed to do, you wouldn't keep doing it. When they're in that thing that they love, they're able to tune out. That's their moment. This is their meditation.
Yeah. So have you ever considered hunting or do you just say that's Alex's thing?
Oh no, I sometimes go.
Okay.
And I've had that experience where what you've talked about. I'm happy to walk, and I've killed some birds before, and you're like, yeah,
Uh,
that's fine. But the thing, to be honest, is that I don't want to eat pheasant. I'll eat elk and I'll eat
okay.
venison, but I'm not that interested in eating pheasant, so I don't want to kill it if I'm not going to eat it.
So uh totally raises another topic because I think hunters are some of the most important get in nature conservationists there are.
Yeah.
Um, and getting connected to their food source, like it's another way to eat super healthy. Like hunters sometimes get a deer and that's the meat they eat that winter. So
Oh yeah.
they'd rather have their venison, which somebody just told me is like the healthiest meat you can have, way more than they'd want to have a hot dog or whatever it is. And I think it gets back into that like eating super healthy because you want to eat the stuff that you caught, that you shot, all those things. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's people think it's like when it's a sport, you think of like people coming across the West in trains in the 1820s, killing all the buffalo just for the heck of shooting. Like that's not what hunting is at all, especially if you're doing it with a bow. Like
Yeah.
you're hoping to get some meat to put in your freezer, and you're going to be very grateful for the opportunity. You're going to appreciate the meat. You're connected to your food source. And then, hopefully you're stopping by the farmer's market afterwards.
You pick up your veggies.
Yeah. Yeah. So with your kids, they're obviously into nature. Did that happen naturally, or was that an effort by you guys, or was it just being around you guys?
I think it's how we vacation,
Mhm.
sailing or skiing or hiking or whatever. So they grew up kind of indoctrinated into it. And I think the community that we live in plays a huge role. These
Mhm.
kids are outside, they are running around, they are exploring, and you know, they're very lucky.
So with kids, it's interesting because you have the sport parent, and some of us take it over the top. I've taken it over the top at times. There is something that's super exciting. Maybe it's a distraction from the rest of your life, but it's super exciting to see your kids kind of excel in sports. Uh, but I wonder if it's more primal than that. I think it's just fun to see your kids running, doing things that require speed or agility or strength. So I don't know if it has to be your daughter scoring a goal in a soccer game or if it just has to be your daughter running down a trail having a blast. Do you see any
Or
truth to
maybe
that?
it's even more primal than that, where it's like, this is health.
Yeah.
This is my kid, and my kid is healthy. They're going to be okay.
Yeah. If you come home and your kid is like, or you're out and your kid is climbing a tree, or your kid's like, I'm gonna take the dog for a walk on the trails, like it definitely,
You're like, I won. I
yes,
won. And if you come home and your kid's on the couch, doing whatever, you're like, man.
yeah, it like lightens your soul somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you want for kids who are doing all the sports stuff, you definitely want them to transition to doing the more adult sports,
Lifetime.
the lifetime sports. But lifetime sports are not just golf and tennis. I mean, lifetime sports are the skiing, the hiking, and we keep saying skiing, and like out of 365 days a year, how many days do you actually ski? But a lot of the days you're preparing your body to ski.
Yes.
You're like, I want to be able to ski when I'm 70.
Yep.
Didn't your in-laws ski like 100 days last year or something?
No
Not that
way.
many.
They did ski last year though, and that was like I remember crying skiing behind them. It was like my in-laws in the front, and there was There's 9 grandchildren and they were skiing behind them in this like protective barrier so that nobody would bump into them because it was in one of those like really crowded ski
Oh,
slopes.
okay.
And I
Yeah.
remember this is it. This
Yeah.
is as good as it gets.
So do you ever talk to your kids, or do you get the impression that they get it at all, that getting out in nature is good for stress reduction? Because I mean, being an adolescent has become super stressful these days.
I don't think I think it's one of those things like show it, don't say it. They know. I've
Hmm.
even had my kids be like, "Hey, mom, think you should go for a walk?" Like they see me getting like antsy, jacked up, not okay, and they suggest a walk, and because they know. It's funny,
Uh,
my middle daughter, she sails in college, but when sailing ended, she had time on her hands for the first time, and she's a freshman. So it was like, November 1st and sailing's over. And she was like calling me. She's like, I live in the city. I didn't even know because I'd been on the water so much. And she's like, I really miss nature. I miss green space.
yeah.
They know.
It, it's something that everybody kind of confronts at some point. Emma talked about that when I interviewed her. Was she'd played field hockey, lacrosse her whole life. She gets to college and she doesn't have that programmed in, so it's kind of like more go to the gym, do an exercise class, so much more uh, controlled. Um, and making that transition to be like, I got to find my adult fitness and also figure out a way to get outside.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it's hard. Like a lot of people are just going from work to the gym. And I think it doesn't cross their mind that throwing in a hike or throwing in an outdoor sport would be super helpful.
I think that's worth discussing because it's certain times in my life where, I'm busier at work and like I started lifting weights with a neighbor and we do it early in the morning. And between walking a dog at whatever level and work and kids and being a mom, and I've already lifted weights, it's like, do I really have the time? How do I integrate all of the things I want to do to be healthy within the certain amount of time that I have? So, how do you do it? You're a doctor, you got a family, you got to walk your dogs. How do you make sure you get it all? And what do you prioritize?
Well, I'm an empty nester. So
That helps.
I just said that the other day. I was like, back in the day, I'd be rushing out of the office to go coach lacrosse or watch my kids play a sport, or to go to a case at the hospital. Now I'm rushing out to maybe take a nap before I do my workout. but uh but back in the day when we were in the thick of it, I had to either get up early in the morning and do it. But when they were real little, it was like put them in the jogging stroller. Like that was a
Yeah.
standard thing. And when they were older, like I used to do a thing where I took one kid every Saturday morning for a pretty long kayak, and we would take donuts and like orange juice, which way too much sugar. I wouldn't do that now, but we would kayak down the river and would have a picnic down the river.
Yep.
Usually, sometimes it was the youngest, so the youngest didn't wake up all the other ones. And we would do hikes also, just same thing, like take breakfast and do hikes and things like that. Um,
So you integrated them and you motivated them and you just brought them with you.
yeah, yeah, it worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
So
And then you taught them to love it too.
yeah, and hopefully they still do. They don't all love skiing. Ryan likes skiing. Roddy loves skiing. Mary Kate and Emma are okay with it, but one of Emma's friends mentioned it as a bachelorette party, and Emma has not skied since she was 16, and she was like, "I'm a good skier. I'm a good athlete. I'll be fine." I was like, I was glad they did it before because it's hard if you've never done it to
Yeah.
start it as an adult. So my last thing I kind of want to talk to you about, although who knows where this topic will go, is being a cancer survivor.
Mhm.
You kind of touched on it a little bit. You and Alex are both cancer survivors. Um, what do you think is the role of nature in that? It obviously had a huge role in your guys' life, but how would you promote that to other people to be like, get back to nature? It'll be super helpful.
Um, okay. Yes.
Big topic.
it's a big topic.
Yeah.
I do think nature played a huge role in my recovery. In general, I felt that it was my responsibility to do whatever part of the healing I could. I know that, following all the protocol and the treatment of everything that was given to me was, obviously a full yes for that. But then my next question was what's my role in healing? How can I put myself in a better place for healing? And so that was to stay active and to stay as healthy as I could, which means being in nature. And then it took on all these other paths of, like, I went down the road of energy work, which has been fascinating to me, and healing and being positive. And to me, if you were just to take being positive and recovering from cancer, I think they're very connected. Not that you can't be positive and have things not go your way. That is possible. But the more positive you are and the more hopeful you are, I think the more smoothly things are likely to go for you. So, what do you need to do to be positive? How do you need to stay in that place? That connects back to being present, because what stops you from being positive is worried thoughts. If, negative thought is the opposite of positive. So when you're negative, when you're worried, and the best place for me to stay positive was practicing being present. And I needed to be in nature in order to continue to do that. Does that make
So that is great. So this is with healing and you mentioned energy healing. That's a big topic. We'll do that in your next podcast.
Okay, good.
But like I think getting into nature is hugely beneficial for healing. Like even my friend who had a rotator cuff tear, he's out there with his arm in a sling, walking all over the place. Getting your body moving is great. Eating healthy is great. Um, Being in nature is huge for healing, but some people have a ton of opportunity. Like I can see the trail from where I'm sitting right now. For other people, they got to put a lot more effort to get into nature. Um, you work as a life coach also. Do you promote nature? How do you convince people to get into nature? Any ideas how I would promote like being like you'll be healthier if you're getting out there a couple times a week?
Um, I would say in general, what stops people is that they make it too grand. And that has been a lot of this conversation. This has been a grand conversation where we're talking about untouched nature and being out west and being in these Sherwood woods and all these things that a lot of people don't have access to. But if you were just to say, like, what could you do for 5 minutes today or 3 minutes today where you're in nature? Would you be willing to go dig in your garden? Can you do that? Do you have a bird feeder? What do you have near you? Do you have a trail by your work? Just that first step is what we need people to do. What's the smallest thing that you can do today to be in nature? And that builds on itself and becomes a habit. And if you can do that, just like, you're always doing the challenges, but what's one thing you can do? And then that, if you promise yourself you're going to go do it for 1 minute, by the time you got your shoes on and you're out there for 1 minute, it turns into seven. And then you start liking it and then you keep doing it.
That's really interesting because, like, with fitness, it's so straightforward. We kind of have like a marathon CrossFit culture where it's like all or nothing.
Mhm.
Um, Plenty of people do a marathon. It's awesome. It's great they're doing marathons. Like Erin just did a marathon. It's awesome. And it's incredible. But Erin will keep walking after she does her marathon and keep running after she does her marathon. There's other people who they do a marathon and they cross it off their bucket list and they're done. Like check fitness and they never work out again. It's
Right.
kind of the same thing with nature. Like you don't feel like just because you and Alex might be hiking in Alaska wrestling bears. And while Alex is shooting elk with his bow and arrow, doesn't mean that just going to your local park, if you have a car, you can drive to your local park and doing the one little 1 mile trail. Like there's a beautiful trail right by Annapolis High School. When Rod used to have lacrosse practice there, I would go walk and run that trail all the time. There's trails all around Anne Arundel County,
Oh,
but
yeah.
also just any grass you can get to. And we did the grounding challenge. It's like that's kind of like baby steps. Put your
Yeah.
foot bare feet and just get out there, and even the grounding challenge, like there's huge health benefits from just touching the earth.
And just notice how you feel. I mean, if you ask yourself before you go into nature, "Hey, how do I feel?" And then you ask yourself, how do you feel when you get out? You, I believe that you'll notice a difference. Just noticing that is going to be more motivating for you to get back in there.
Yeah.
But I would also say don't bring your phone. If you can,
Yeah.
just allow just that however many minutes, the thin edge to the wedge. What's the smallest thing you can do for whatever time you're capable of, and then let it grow.
So that's a trick. That's a trick because I think your ultimate goal should be to get rid of the phone. But I could see the person who's like, I don't want to walk, but I'll do it if I can listen to my podcast, or I'll do it if I can listen to my music. And then gradually you become more mindful and you start appreciating nature and you skip the phone. So it's kind of like, which one do you do? I've noticed myself, I need to start leaving the phone. You
Okay,
know,
well, how about
I
you
have too
just
many
say,
podcasts.
can I just turn the phone off for this
Yeah.
amount of time?
Yeah. I know I've noticed that with myself. It's like I like listening to podcasts, but I'm like, if I listen to a podcast on the way to work and I listen to it on my walk and I listen to too many podcasts in one week, there's just too much
Yeah.
going and there's no quiet thought. So then I'm like, okay, go into nature, go for a walk, go for a run. Do not listen to anything.
Just allow that time to just be, which is really hard, especially in today's world. You know, it's funny that you were saying that about the listening and the listening, the listening. Like, it's like, do I need to keep improving? Do I need to be getting better? Is there more knowledge that I need to have? How can I show up better, be stronger, be more healthy, be more whatever? And then when and where is the time where you just are like, nope, this is all I need to do. I don't need to be anything. I don't need to show up like anybody else. I don't need to wear anything. That's the thing about nature. Nature's not like, your socks don't match. You
Yeah.
look badly. You know, it just is what you're enough, just you, as you are, wherever you are. No one's judging.
So this is our big conclusion. So somebody comes into my office, they're pre-diabetic, 30, 50 pounds overweight, and I'm telling them they need to eat healthy, need to exercise. Uh, and I say, you need to get into nature. You need to get sunlight. You need to get your vitamin D. You need to be in the elements. And then you're being their life coach and you're writing a plan. You're putting it on their calendar. What are you telling them? Step one.
Well, as their life coach, I would say, you just heard all this information from Dr. House. What is the one thing that you heard that you're really motivated to try? And they would say, oh, I think that nature thing sounds good. And I would say, well, what does that look like to you? And then they're going to tell me what their specific situation is. Oh, well, near my mother-in-law's house, she's got this pond. I like that thing. I'll be like, great. How often are you willing to go to the pond? I'm going to get it out of them. I want each person, everyone who's watching, all 10 million people who are watching this podcast, I want them
So
to think,
right now it's just my mom and my sister, but
oh, hey
maybe
guys,
this one will get me more.
hey. What what is the nature that's near you that you are motivated to go spend time in? That's question number one. Then question number two, how often are you willing to try to do that this week, just this coming week? And then what do you want to accomplish from that? Like, how do you want to feel when you're doing it? Okay, peaceful, calm, less worried. Great. Call me after you did it.
Awesome. All right. That was perfect. We'll be done.
We're done.
I'll come up with our next topic.
All right, you hit
All
me
right.
with your next
Enjoy the
topic.
rest of your day.
Thanks,
See
Ty.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.